Welcome back, everyone. I'm Abigail.
And I'm Grayson, and today we will be discussing both the 1953 and the 1963 Kentucky Derbies.
Starting with the 1953 Kentucky Derby, which took place on May 2nd. This race was different from previous years because it was one of the first Kentucky Derby races to be broadcasted on television.
The first place competitor was Dark Star, and second place was Native Dancer.
Dark Star won 6 races in his career out of 13 starts, most notably the Kentucky Derby and the Derby Trial.
Dark Star started the race with odds of 25 to 1, Native Dancer being the favorite choice, with odds of 3 to 5.
After he won the Derby, he went on to compete in the Preakness Stakes, where he came in 5th and Native Dancer came out first. After this race, it was discovered that he had a serious tendon injury and it ended Dark Star's racing career.
He was retired to stud and sold to a French breeding company in 1967, where his most notable child, Gazela, won the Prix de Diane and was a great broodmare.
Upon examining his pedigree, we see many familiar names like St. Simon, Spendthrift, Spearmint, Carbine, and Ben Brush. Additionally, we see that his sire was Royal Gem, who was an imported stallion from Australia.
A little bit of inbreeding can be spotted in Dark Star's pedigree with a horse named Son-in-Law.
Son-in-Law was a British thoroughbred racehorse who was the leading sire in Great Britain and Ireland in 1924 and 1930.
Where he did produce good racers, his name is most commonly seen in show jumpers' pedigrees today.
Moving on to the second place competitor, Native Dancer.
He is nicknamed the Grey Ghost due to his speed and gray coat that is unusual in thoroughbreds. He was also the first horse made famous through television.
He was inducted into the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame in 1963 because out of his 22 races, he won all except one, the Kentucky Derby.
After his defeat in the Derby, he went on to win the Belmont Stakes and Preakness Stakes in 1953. Of his third-year season, he ran 3 starts in his 4-year-old season, but was retired due to injury.
Despite this injury, he was still named the 1954 Horse of the Year. He retired to stud in 1955 and is now seen in the majority of modern-day pedigrees.
He sired many champions and good broodmares, one of which was Natalma, the dammed Northern Dancer who was discussed in a previous video.
By 2008, every competitor in the Kentucky Derby could be traced back to Native Dancer.
To commemorate his racing career, a statue of Native Dancer was constructed in Congress Park in Saratoga Springs.
When looking at his pedigree, we see more familiar names like Roxanne, Hastings, and Ben Brush. We are starting to see these names pop up more and more in these pedigrees as their popularity and racing careers are becoming more and more widespread.
In this pedigree, we see Polomelas, listed twice. He was a British thoroughbred racehorse who was the leading sire of racehorses in Great Britain and Ireland in 1914, 1915, 1916, 1920, and 1921.
Polymelus is the grandson of Bendor, and one of his descendants is Secretariat, who we will discuss in our next video.
Now, let's discuss the 1963 Kentucky Derby, which took place on May 4th.
The winner was Chattagay, and Neverbend came in second.
Chattagay won the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont Stakes, and was the U.S. champion 3-year-old colt in 1963.
Out of his 24 races, he won 11 and placed in 4, and was retired to stud at Darby Dan Farm.
He did not do very well as a stud in America, but in 1971 he was sold to a Japanese breeding farm, siring the 1981 champion juvenile colt Hakuto Flag.
Looking at this pedigree, we see Son-in-Law, Man-o'-War, Polymelus, and Spearmint all listed, some more familiar names. The other horse we see listed multiple times is a mare named Celine, and not much is known about her other than that she was a thoroughbred born in 1919.
Moving on to the second place contestant, Neverbend, who was the 1962 American champion 2-year-old and the leading sire in Great Britain and Ireland in 1971.
Out of his 23 races, he won 13 and placed in 4. He was retired to stud in 1964, producing 61 stake winners and broodmares that produced 116 stake winners.
That's right, and 2 of his daughters were even voted Kentucky Broodmare of the Year.
Looking at Neverbend's pedigree, we see Polymelus and Spearmint again, but we also see a horse named Teddy.
Teddy was a French thoroughbred racehorse born in 1913, who is the grandson to Bendor and was the champion 3-year-old colt in Spain in 1916.
He was not an extremely good racer, but he was a good sire. being named the leading sire in France in 1923. However, his sire line in America is mainly continued through his son, Sir Galahad.
That was all we had on the 1953 and 1963 Kentucky Derbies, so now it's time for a fun horse fact.
Our fun fact for today is that some horses can grow mustaches, which can help them feel grass in poor light conditions and is present on a gene that codes for hairy horses.
The most common breeds that grow these mustaches are the larger draft breeds like Shire, Clydesdales, and Gypsy Vanner, which are very hairy breeds and are from regions with colder climates.
This slide contains all the sources used in this video.
We hope to see you next time when we talk about the 1973 Kentucky Derby.
Thanks for watching!